All right, we get it rolling on the Krug Show. Music sounds a little different, I gotta be honest. But anyway, we're in Kev's studio. Welcome to the Krug Show, brought to you by Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out, and they do run out. So check out Pig in a Pickle. 2 locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. Go say hi to Damon. Go say hi to Mary. Get some brisket. Get some brisket chili. Tell them that Krug sent you. And this video, or the stream, I should say, is also brought to you by Mancini. Sleepworld is now a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. That's right. I'm sleeping on a Mancini's bed, and you should too. It is absolutely a fantastic bed. Mancini's offers a 120-night guarantee with a range of brands and price points. And with Mancini's, you get free next day delivery. That's right. You pick out the bed today, you are sleeping on it tomorrow. And all you got to do is click the link below or go to sleepworld.com to find a bed that works for you. Whether shopping online or visiting in store, use the code Krug10 and you're getting 10% off. 10% off. That's a really, really good deal. Once again, Krug10, K-R-U-E-G 10, and you're getting 10% off, whether it's in store or online at sleepworld.com. Once again, Mancini Sleepworld, now a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. Use that code Krug10 and you're getting 10% off. You know, that's pretty good. So you buy, who knows? You buy a $3,000 bed, you're saving $300 just simply by typing in Krug10 at the checkout or in store at Mancini or at sleepworld.com, and of course in store at any Mancini Sleepworld, and they're all throughout Northern California. And thanks to Mancini's for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. Yeah, they brought our bed. We picked it out. It's fantastic. It's about it's like 4 stories tall. I mean, my wife is 5'1". She needs a small ladder to jump up on it. But you know what? It's fantastic. We're both sleeping amazing. They took away the old mattress. They brought in the new one. They said they were going to be there at 10. Guess what? They were there at 10. They gave us a 2-hour window. It's not one of these, we'll be there sometime on Thursday. No, they told us, well, they'll be there between 10 a.m. and noon. And sure enough, 10 a.m., boom, they were there. They took away the old mattress. They set up the new mattress. They carried it upstairs, the whole deal. Mancini Sleepworld, we are huge, huge fans. So they're a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. Once again, Krug10 to get 10% off at sleepworld.com. So there you go. Check them out online or in store. Tell them that you are supporting the Krug Show and type in Krug10 and you'll get 10% off at Mancini's. All right, let's talk a little bit about this. I titled this video 10 questions that are going to make or break the Niners season. And I'm just going to run them down for you quickly. And then Kenny says, Grampy Krug? What? Do not be calling me Grampy. Coach Scrapper. What's up, Kev? Your grandfather here. Oh, no. Anyway. But we will get into some of the chats in a bit. But first, let's get into the 10 questions that I think are most pressing in Ninerland. I was down in Santa Clara today at practice. Kind of an uneventful practice. Brandon Aiyuk was there for the second straight day. No new news on whether or not they're closer to signing him. I got to think he's going to sign. You know, he's standing there at practice 2 days in a row. It's like people are always saying, hey, I am where my feet are. Well, if he is where his feet are, he's a Niner. And the Niners sound like they're trying to get it done. So hopefully they do. Okay, so let's go into the 10 key questions. Question number 1 is what's going to happen with these holdouts? Trent Williams, Brandon Aiyuk. It starts right there. The Niners are less dynamic without Aiyuk. They're not as good a team without him. That's why they should keep him and not trade him. because they're better with him than without him. They got a much better chance of winning the Super Bowl this year if they have him than if they don't. So I do think the Aiyuk thing is going to get done. I think it's going to be right around. I think they've already agreed on the money. Now it's a matter of they're agreeing on the length of the deal and the guaranteed dollars. They'll iron it all out. He'll be there, and I think it gets. I think they announced the signing. If I had to predict, I'll say Sunday during Niners Saints. They'll announce it at Levi's that Brandon Aiyuk is signed with the 49ers. Press conference coming tomorrow. That'll be my guess. Trent Williams, I think, is probably going to come back. My guess is at the end of the preseason. I don't think Trent wants to play the preseason. I think the Niners will respond to Trent's holdout by giving him a couple $1 million of guaranteed money, redoing his deal again, attaching some guaranteed dollars this year. I think that's what's going to result in that. Or I think that's what his holdout will result in. I think he'll get a few more millions of dollars guaranteed this year. Right now, Trent's making 23. Tristan Wirfs is the top paid tackle. He's at 28.5. I don't think you got to get him to 28.5 or 29. I don't think it's like, hey, you got to beat Wirfs, even though Trent's the best. I just think you got to get him a couple more $1 million guaranteed. So maybe 2, maybe 3, something like that, I think gets it done. That would be my guess. So I think the Trent thing gets done before week 1 as well. So I think both Aiyuk and Williams will be in the fold. That's question number 1. Question number 2, is the 49ers offensive line improved? Well, if you have Trent Williams at left tackle, you have Banks in a contract year at left guard, the center position, you sure have a lot of great competition. I mean, you have Jake Brendel, you have Nick Sakel, Drake Nugent, Ben Barch, Jarrett Kingston, Pooney can play there. You have options there at center. And then Pooney has been playing right guard because Feliciano's been hurt and Burford's got a broken hand. So I think Pooney has the build, the mindset, the aggressiveness, the mentality to be a plug and play starter at right guard. And I think that will help the 49ers in the run game because I think he'll give them a little bit more push. I like the idea of Pooney starting at right guard and using Burford or Feliciano off the bench. So he is going to be given every opportunity, Dominic Pooney is, to start at right guard. And I think he'll wind up starting there against the Jets week 1. It won't be easy because you're looking at Quinnen Williams on a very tough Jet defensive line in that first game. But I do think Pooney's a plug-and-play starter at right guard for the Niners going into the season. Question 3, can any of the young offensive weapons contribute this year? And when I say young, I'm not just talking about the rookies. I'm talking about Braden Willis. I'm talking about Mason Pline, Isaac Guerrero, Ricky Pearsall, Cody Schrader, Jacob Cowing, and JP Mason. And I would say absolutely the answer is yes, that some of those weapons can contribute this year. I think Pline and Willis have the ability to contribute this year. I think Pearsall definitely is going to contribute this year. I think Cowing and Mason, I think, makes a big contribution this year. JP Mason spent $3,000 this offseason on a jugs gun. And I mean, Brock Purdy was on target all day today, but he threw one ball to JP Mason that was so off target. And last year, Mason never would have come close to catching this football. This year, he plucked it with both hands. And it looks, I mean, you can see the work he's done on that jugs machine. He's a much better receiver right now than he used to be. So I think Mason and Cowing and Pearsall and Schrader and Pline and Willis and maybe even Guerrero later in the year if he gets healthy. I think all these guys have the ability to make an impact. Now, what kind of an impact? I think Mason and Pearsall probably make the biggest impact, but I'll tell you, watching Jacob Cowing has had a very weird camp. He had the first day, he looked great. Then he's been out with the hamstring strain. Then he was working back and clearly not 100%. Now he seems to be back towards closer to 100%, and he looks great again. So I thought today Jacob Cowing looked fantastic. And if he can just stay healthy, I think Jacob Cowan could make a nice impact right away. All right. That's question number 3. Question number 4 is on the defensive side of the ball. Is Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley, who's his right-hand man, going to be effective at defensive coordinator? And I think the answer to this one is yes, because I think the players, Sorensen is their hand-picked guy. When you get your hand-picked coordinator, you better play ball and you better bring energy and you better play with your hair on fire. And I think guys will play hard. I also kind of like what the look of this young secondary looks like. There's great depth in this young secondary. I mean, I've got a couple questions about the defense, but I think overall, I think Sorensen has a presence. I think he has a trust of the players. I think Staley clearly is another guy that the players really believe in. I think it's going to work out. I think, last year it was a tough thing to ask Steve Wilkes to, run somebody else's defense. Now Sorensen's been in-house, and he's, the continuity in the scheme is there. He knows the players. There's a trust in him. Sometimes the bigger name coach is not always the right guy. Steve Wilkes has a much bigger reputation, obviously, than Nick Sorensen, but I think Sorensen with Brandon Staley there, I think is going to be a nice little mix. Now, part of it is they're loaded with all kinds of young talent in the secondary, and they redid their defensive line, and they still have a lot of good linebackers. So the talent is there. But I think Sorensen seems like a really bright guy. I like the fact that there's scheme, cohesiveness and continuity. I think they like their scheme, and I like their scheme. I like the wide 9. I like a 5-2 front, which is what they feature most of the time. They play a lot of zone, but as they get better defensive backs, I think they'll play more man in time. But if the question is Sorensen and Staley going to be effective as a defensive coordinator, combo, I think they're going to be more effective than what Wilkes was a year ago. That's how I would term it. The fifth question is, do the 49ers have enough defensive end depth? And I think the answer to this is clearly no. You have Nick Bosa, you have Leonard Floyd, you have Yatir Gross-Matos. Gross-Matos has looked pretty good, to be honest. I mean, he's a huge guy who's really starting to come into his own as a football player. Robert Beal has put on about 12 to 15 pounds of good weight, and he's closer to 260, and he's moving incredibly well out there. But they haven't played any games except for one, and they haven't really incurred any injuries. And they still, they're going to go with 5 defensive ends. And right now, who's that 5th defensive end? I mean, it's Jonathan Garvin. And I just don't know. They missed Drake Jackson, and I think the 49ers are going to be in the market for a defensive lineman at the cutdown. And we'll go through a couple names here in a minute. But I would say absolutely they do not have enough defensive end depth specifically. I think that's the spot where you really got to look around at the cutdown to see who gets cut and what their price tag is and what the Niners need to do to acquire them, because I think they definitely could use another defensive end or two. Question 6 is Devondre Campbell. Is he going to be an effective replacement for Dre Greenlaw? And I would say my guess on this one is no. This is a little bit of a guess, right? Campbell made a couple nice plays today against the run, but you're trying to step in for Dre Greenlaw, who is just so awesome against the run. And I just don't see that agility or that motor or that ability to break down in space against even the most athletic weapons. I just don't see a Greenlaw type player. Now I love what I'm seeing from D Winters. Love what I see from Tatum Bethune, even though he's a step slow. Really love what I see from Jalen Graham. And Curtis Robinson in this camp is coming of age. I mean, Curtis Robinson is really looking good. Flanagan Fowles is playing fast. So I'm not really a believer in Devondre Campbell. He's going to have to win me over. Right now, to me, he looks like a guy who can be picked on in coverage and take some bad steps and doesn't look overly athletic in space, breaking down, trying to make tackles. So I would say he cannot adequately replace Dre Greenlaw, and they'll have to look at one of those other guys. That would be my guess there. Question 7 is, can George Odum hold down the free safety spot with Talanoa Hufanga's out? Now, Talanoa Hufanga's, got the coming off the ACL. He was hoping to be back week 1. They were saying he might come back to practice as soon as, late this week. If the Niners had the joint practices with the Saints, there was a lot of speculation that, Huff would have been out there. I'll say this. I mean, one, I would take my time with Huff. It's a long year. Get him healthy. Get him healthy before you put him out there. That's first and foremost. But number 2, the next reason to be patient is George Odum is playing his ass off. George Odum looks great. George Odum is a tremendous special teamer. He's an all-pro special teamer. That's why he's here. They made a sizable investment in special teams by signing Odum. George Odum in this camp has looked like a very seasoned free safety. He's breaking on the football. He's playing on time. He's delivering big hits. He's making the right, he's in the right areas in the run fits. His timing in the pass game looks far better than anything I've ever seen. So George Odum looks dramatically improved. He knows this defense. He looks like he can play free safety. So if you had said that to me at the beginning of camp, I would have said no. George is a special teamer, strictly. But watching him in this camp, I'm pretty sure George Odum can play free safety. Now, they also have Malik Mustafa and Jalen Mahoney, and they've got other guys they can lean on. And obviously, Jair Brown is, a tremendous player. But George Odum can play free safety until Hufanga's ready to go. If they want to go with Odum, they can go with Odum. They don't have to go with a Mustafa rookie. They don't have to go with Mahoney, who's also a rookie. They can go with the veteran George Odum, and he can stand up and play. So that is exciting, how well George Odum has played safety in this camp and thus far in the preseason. And that was question 7. Question 8. Who are the 49ers going to go with 6 corners? Who are their 6 best corners? Well, the 4 locks to make the roster are Mooney Ward, Diamador Lenore, Renardo Green, who is just their second-round pick. You're not going to cut your second-round pick, and he's played great. And Isaac Yiadom, who was signed over in the offseason coming off a phenomenal year with the Saints. So those 4 guys are on the roster for sure, unless there's injuries. So you're really looking for 2 more between Darrell Luter, who looks phenomenal, Sam Womack, who also looks really, really good, Rock Ya-Sin, who's the veteran who's been is healthy and played great in this camp, Ambry Thomas, who's dinged up right now, but he once upon a time was a 3rd-round pick, and Chase Lucas, who's, very aggressive on the practice field and is a very, stellar special teams player. So you have 5 good candidates going for maybe 2 spots. And I'd probably go Luter and Womack and go with the youth. But Ambry Thomas, maybe you put him on the IR? I don't know. Maybe you put him on the PUP list to start the year. Rock Ya-Sin is going to be a very difficult guy to cut. He is a veteran corner. He knows how to play all the short and intermediate stuff. He's got perfect footwork and hand placement and all that stuff on all the, the fade routes and all the stuff where you really need to be technically sound. He's a veteran, right? He's a veteran. He's a technically sound, starting caliber, NFL caliber corner who's had injuries in the past, but he's healthy and he's playing great. So this will probably solve itself via injury. But Mooney, Lenore, Renardo Green, Isaac Yiadom are your front 4. I'd go with Luter and Womack as 5 and 6. And then that means I'm cutting or doing something with Chase Lucas, Rock Ya-Sin, and Ambry Thomas. But somehow, some way, I think this will solve itself. I don't like cutting good corners. And Rock Ya-Sin, Ambry Thomas, Sam Womack, Luter, Yadam, Renardo, Lenore, Mooney. I mean, they're all good corners. They're all good corners. And I definitely don't like cutting good corners. That's question number 8. So I would say definitely the front four, and then I'll go Luter and Womack. But I think ultimately an injury or two will probably thin the herd and decide that, make that decision an easier decision. All right, that's question 8. Question number 9. There was a phenomenal article in Bleacher Report written by Ryan Fowler, and it was an article about one player each NFL team should wind up trading this summer. And the 3 names that I think really, if I'm the Niners, I'm calling these 3 GMs, and I'm at least kicking tires on all 3 of these guys. One of them's Tutu Atwell. They're saying the Rams are going to wind up getting rid of Tutu Atwell, that he may get cut at the deadline or at the cutdown, or that the Rams may actually trade Tutu Atwell. Atwell's the kind of burner that the Niners wanted Danny Gray to be. He's a difference making. I mean, there's fast guys and then there's difference making speed. It would be really, really nice that in addition to having Aiyuk and JJ and Debo and Kittle and all these weapons, if the Niners had a true game breaker receiver, and that's what Danny Gray represents. And maybe that's what Jacob Cowing represents. So maybe they don't need Tutu Atwell, but Atwell is a premier game breaker with 4.2 speed. So I would definitely be calling Les Snead and seeing if they're going to cut him, or if so, would they take a day 3 pick to, so you could avoid the waiver wire process and just grab a guy like Atwell. You put a difference-making speedster like Atwell with the Niners' weapons, and it's game over. It's absolutely game over. And then the 2 other names out there that are super intriguing. One is DeMarvin Leal of the Steelers, who's one of the names that, our guy from Pittsburgh the other night, who we had on, Andrew Filipponi, said sleeper name that could be coming back in the Aiyuk trade with Pittsburgh if it ever comes about is DeMarvin Leal, who has been kind of, former Texas A&M defensive lineman, 6'4", 290, always, freakish long arms, freakish speed and athleticism. Hasn't been that freakish as far as his production thus far, isn't strong against the run, but a lot of people really like him, and he's having a great camp for the Steelers, and a lot of speculation is that he may be available. The Niners need as many good defensive linemen as they can get. And Leal's interesting because he is the kind of guy that may be able to play defensive end in the wide 9, and he definitely could play in their bare front. He's a very versatile, athletic defensive lineman. We've seen Chris Kasarik turn lesser players like Arden Key and others into significant players. So if he could do his magic with DeMarvin Leal from A&M via the Steelers, that would be an interesting name. And the third name is hard to even believe he's on this list because he was only the 7th pick overall as recently as last year's draft. But Tyree Wilson, the Raider defensive end from Texas Tech, who's 6'6", 275. They're saying the Raiders may go in a different direction and trade him at the cutdown. And you know what? Tyree Wilson with the Raiders is not getting a whole lot done. Tyree Wilson's talent opposite Nick Bosa with Chris Kasarik in this wide 9, that could be the piece that gets the Niners over the top. I mean, if Kasarik could get through to a guy like Tyree Wilson with all the talent that Wilson has and all that size and all that speed, you put him in this scheme with Leonard Floyd and Bosa and Hargrave on a line where nobody's focusing on him really at all, a guy like Tyree Wilson could explode with the 49ers. Now, what would you trade? I don't know, because it's hard to say. He's not been very good. But, I would say maybe a 3rd-round pick, maybe a 4th-round pick. He himself was the 7th pick overall in the 2023 draft. It hasn't worked out. He's had some amazing highlights. So it wouldn't be a 1st-round pick, probably wouldn't be a 2nd-round pick, probably a 3rd or a 4th or some combination thereof, or maybe a player in a pick, something like that. But if the Raiders want to pivot off of Tyree Wilson, if you're John Lynch, Similar to the deal that he made with Lake and Tomlinson, where he traded a 5th-round pick to the Lions for Tomlinson. Tomlinson had been a late first-round pick. He was bad in Detroit. Well, he came to San Francisco. He had some good years. Niners eventually let him go in free agency. But Lake and Tomlinson, had a career renaissance in San Francisco. And maybe Tyree Wilson could have the same kind of career renaissance. If somehow Kasarik in the Niners scheme could get the most out of Tyree Wilson, that might be enough right there to vault the 49ers past Green Bay, past Philly, past, Detroit, and into the Super Bowl, and maybe in past teams like Baltimore and Kansas City, and get them over the top. Tyree Wilson's an enormous talent. That's question number 9. And question number 10 is Brock Purdy. Is Brock Purdy, does he need to play this week against the Saints? That's question 10. And I know the argument is like, yeah, Brock needs to play. He's only 23. But also, you're talking about a smaller bodied quarterback in a really long year. He just played until February the 11th. It's his first full off season. The guy just got married. I personally would think that I would rather sit him out and be extra cautious. I think mentally he's going to do the reps. He's going to be ready for the Jets in week 1. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind he's going to be ready. To me, anytime you put him out there, you're risking injury. Yeah. Do I want him in rhythm? Yeah. But I'm starting to side with Sean McVay. I'm willing to trade week 1 and week 2 and week 3 rhythm for full health. And that's what McVay has. He sits all of his guys. His guys are in full health at the beginning of the year, and they're rusty. The Niners are not rusty, but oftentimes they're not in full health. I'd rather take my chances, with a full roster, full complement of my salary cap playing and be conservative in the preseason. I'd sit Purdy. I wouldn't play him. There are 3 preseason games under the current structure. This is the game that teams play their guys, and then the next game they sit them out. So it's like the first game they sit them out, and then the third game they sit them out, but they play them in the second game. So I would expect Purdy will play a series or 2. If it was me, I wouldn't play him. I'd sit him out. Let him get a tune-up next week, going into week 1. But I think they'll play him. I think he'll play a couple series, especially if they score. They'll get him in, they'll get him out. I don't even think he plays a full quarter. I think he plays maybe a series, maybe 2 if they go 3 and out on the first series. But I expect him to play, but not significantly in this game. All right, there you go. Those are the 10 questions. Let's hit a couple of the supers and we'll bolt for the door. We got this one from Atlanta 3. Is Mason Pline going to make this roster? Well, I don't know. I would say this, just a quick evaluation of the Niners. Tongus is having a great camp. He makes play after play after play. Now he's small. He doesn't have a lot of power, but he is making a lot of catches. So the Cal kid has looked really, really good. Braden Willis can catch the ball down the field, but he just got absolutely destroyed as a blocker in the Titan game. I mean, they were picking him up and throwing him around. He needs to show a little bit more strength as a blocker, I think, if he's going to be on the team. Latu, I just don't see the urgency. I don't see the urgency there. I don't think he's going to make it. I know he was a 3rd-round pick. I don't see any urgency. You got to have urgency. So I don't think he makes it. Saubert is big and strong and can block, but is just slow. Really, really slow. But I think he'll probably take Charlie Warner's job as tight end 2, and he'll be the primary blocker. Kittle will be the number 1, obviously. Saubert will be number 2. And I think it's going to be Mason Pline as the number 3 guy. He's big. He's a big-bodied guy. He's very athletic. He could be ticketed for the practice squad. They didn't play him at all in the first preseason game. If they pickle jar him and don't play him again, maybe that's their game plan, is to try to get him to the practice squad. But he's a great prospect. 6'8", mechanical engineering major, 10.5-inch hands. He's done nothing but look fluid and catch the ball, and he makes some mistakes because he's a rookie, but he's not making them repeatedly. I think Pline is good enough to make the roster. But there's always, issues with, there's going to be issues this year with how many receivers do you take, how many running backs do you take, how many quarterbacks do you take, how many D linemen do you take, how many corners do you take, and there's a very good chance that they may have to steal from one position to take an extra guy at another position. And there's a chance that if they feel like Pline is going to sneak through waivers, that they could go with Kittle and Saubert and just go with 2 tight ends. They've gone with as many as 4 in the past. I do think Pline, if they go 3, my guess would be Kittle is your 1, Saubert is your 2, Pline is your 3. Saubert's your blocker, Pline's your receiver, Kittle's your starter. I think that's probably how it's going to go. Michael Alanis, hope you had a great day, Larry. What's the latest on Aiyuk? I'm late tuning in. Apologies. Why hasn't he signed or accepted the 49er deal? He wants the best deal he can get, but I think he wants to win. They want to get the best deal they can get. It's taking a lot longer than we thought it was going to take. It doesn't seem to be acrimonious. They're hugging it out. He's still at practice. So on that front, maybe it's good news. To me, the fact that he held in, it's harder to trade a guy who's, there in the meetings and showing you he wants to be there. It's like when a guy holds out, you can kind of wonder, does he want to be here? Is he one of us? Does he want to be part of us? Does he want to be part of another team? Does he want to be here at all? If he really wanted to be here, he'd be here. I mean, you could give yourself all kinds of explanations and excuses why it's okay to trade that player. When the player shows up and they're in the meetings, it's like a loud statement that they are where they want to be. But the holdout is a reminder that they are where they want to be, but they're not making what they want to make. So I do think they'll work it out. And I think that's in the Niners' best interest. Why? Because Brandon Aiyuk's an outstanding receiver. He's 26. He's about to have the best 2 or 3 years of his career. So no doubt in my mind that, keeping Brandon Aiyuk is the thing that gives the Niners the best chance to win the Super Bowl. And that's really, at the end of the day, what this is all about. What gives you the best chance to win the Super Bowl? And to me, keeping Aiyuk gives you a better chance to win the Super Bowl than trading Aiyuk. And if the last report was true, which said that no players were coming back and it would all be picks, in that situation, then you're really talking about, to me, that's almost like categorically a loss, unless you're going to flip those picks to a third team, and 3-team trades are super rare in the NFL. But if you're just taking 2025 draft picks and you're going to be without Brandon Aiyuk, you're not better this year. By definition, you're worse. So that to me was a total non-starter. And I think it would be very unpopular with the fans and the players if they moved Aiyuk and only got back draft pick compensation. Now, if they flip those draft picks for another receiver and that receiver had a good year, that's another thing. But if it's just Aiyuk for picks and the picks are going to be utilized not until April of 2025, that's a hard sell. That's a hard sell for Trent Williams. It's a hard sell to George Kittle. That's a hard sell to anybody who's, all in on this year. And this is a year-to-year proposition in the NFL. So that's it. I mean, the players, you got to be all in. You got to be all in when you're inside your Super Bowl window on winning a championship. And if you're not all in, the players know it and they push back. So Martin says, hey, Larry, are the Niners in danger of a Super Bowl hangover this year? Or do they have a real shot to win the Super Bowl? Well, I think both, right? Um, there is a lack of intensity in this camp compared to past camps, in my opinion. But I think a lot of that is the fact that, a great dynamic player like Aiyuk is not there. And when you take him off the field, he makes a number of great dynamic athletic plays that you're not seeing. So the camp overall seems less dynamic without Aiyuk. That's first and foremost. I also believe that when you go to the Super Bowl, it's kind of like going to the NBA Finals. Are you fired up for basketball in November when you went to the NBA Finals the year before? Probably not. And the same kind of thing in the NFL. If you've gone to the Super Bowl the year before, are you, letting it all hang out in training camp the next year? Probably not. So I think that's just to be expected. I think that's just reality. Once you've been to the promised land, you're going to pace yourself. It's like once you know what what it feels like. I mean, think about it. The NFL is a marathon, and you have to win the marathon by being at your best in the 26th mile. In the Super Bowl, you have to play really well in the Super Bowl. So, once you've had that perspective of, what, we're going to get into a game that's going to mean everything, and how we play in that game is going to determine if we win. I think when you start to compartmentalize and start to look at your pro, existence, that it's probably hard to motivate yourself for training camp and for preseason and for week one when you're a team like the Niners or Kansas City or Philadelphia that's on a regular basis going to the Final Four. You're going to the conference title game. You're going to the Super Bowl. Yeah, I bet you it's hard to get it dialed up in July, but eventually the Niners will. That's the vibe I get. I get the vibe that they're, they've been in the Super Bowl. They know they got to pace themselves. They don't want to burn themselves out in July. That's kind of my read on it. We've got this one from Matt, who says, I realize PFF grades don't mean everything, but Purdy only scored a 48.3. What'd you think of his performance? I didn't grade him out like literally every single play, but I liked the fact that he had the big push to get Mason in the end zone. And I like the fact that, he's playing with a lot of fire. It's a technique rich position, and young players are always going to struggle. But I don't I'll say this. I love PFF. I was just talking the other day to Jeff Deeney, who covers the 49ers for PFF. Good guy. And he puts out a lot of good content. I don't always agree with their grades. I just don't, especially with their offensive linemen. So, I like to look at it. I think it's interesting, but I don't always agree with it. So just because just because there's a PFF grade that doesn't make sense, it won't be the first or the last that I look at and go, I don't get it. I don't see what they're seeing, because I thought Purdy played pretty aggressive football, and I like his fire. And when we asked Chris Forster about him this week, he said, man, he looks awesome. He looks awesome. And they're really, really happy with him. So there you go. And we appreciate that comment. Once again, we are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. And, of course, we are also brought to you by Mancini Sleepworld. Mancini Sleepworld is a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. I have a brand new Mancini's bed. I'm loving it. Mancini's offers a 120-night guarantee with a range of brands and a range of price points. And with Mancini's, you get free next-day delivery. They're just top to bottom, really, really high class all the way around. Great customer service. Click the link below. Go to sleepworld.com. You can find a bed that works for you. There's all kinds of different price points, whether you shop online or visit in-store. All you got to do is use Krug10, and you're getting 10% off, courtesy of the Krug Show. Krug 10, Krug 10, and you'll get 10% off. That's Krug 10, and get 10% off in store or online at sleepworld.com. All right, a couple more in the chat. Nestu G says, are we going to see some Chosen Anderson on Sunday? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. He was out there today. Dennis says, Perfect timing for Mancini's with the bed in the background. There you go. That's Kev's bed, though. That's not the doozy that my wife and I have. I'm in Kev's studio today because I don't know. Kev said, "Dad, you want to do the video for my studio?" I said, "Well, I have my own studio." He said, "Yeah, well, how about use mine?" I said, "All right." So there you go. That's why I'm in Kev's studio. If you're sitting there going, "Why do I look like I'm in a college apartment?" It's because Kev's room is not picked up right now, and we're going to talk about that at the end of this video. Damn it, we are going to have a conversation. Gold Rush says, "Is it Shanahan or Parag?" I guess the question is, what's the question? Is it? I think I think it's more. I guess the question is, what's causing the delay? I do think it may be getting a little personal between Shanahan and Aiyuk, but I think it's more about Parag. I think Parag's a really hard negotiator. I think he has total autonomy within the organization, and I think he's a really tough negotiator. It generally benefits the Niners greatly. And it probably will in this case as well, as far as benefit them on the cap. But man, it's made some of these holdouts really painful. Did they get the best out of Debo when he held out? I don't think so. Did they get the best out of Bosa when he held out? I don't think so. Are they going to get the best this year out of Aiyuk if he winds up signing long term and to a big money extension? I hope so, but I don't. Based on the track record, I'm skeptical. So, what's the right approach? I mean, Prog's there to save the organization as much money as possible. He does a great job at it. As far as the players feel good about the organization. I know that. So, it's not like you got a bunch of guys that don't feel good about the organization. They do feel good about the organization. So that's one of it. That's part of it. Um, that is just really as simple as that. I mean, I think Parag's a really good negotiator, but I think he's a tough negotiator. I do think there might be something personal between Shanahan and Aiyuk, but I really don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. It just seems like they should have been able to overcome their financial differences much easier and quicker than they have. And it makes me wonder if it's personal. But ultimately, at the end of the day, and I've said this a few times, and I really think John Lynch. I think the world of John Lynch. I think the world of Kyle Shanahan. I think these guys are a great combination. I think the 49ers are very fortunate to have those guys. But I definitely have. If you said, do you side with one side or the other here? I side with Aiyuk in this particular situation. I just feel like the fact that the Niners have so many good players, they run the ball as much as they do. They play a really slow pace. All these things drag down his numbers. And, if you're going to, that's fine. You can say it's all in the name of winning, and that's fine. But then don't get real particular with paying your players if their numbers fall slightly below the thresholds of other players at their position. If there are elements that were out of their control that are putting a drag on their numbers and putting a drag on their production. When you play the 28th fastest pace in the league, you play a slow pace. That drags on the offensive players' numbers. When you run the ball all the time, that drags on the receivers' numbers. When you have 6, 7, 8 weapons and you spread the ball around, that drags on the individual's numbers. Aiyuk had nothing to do with any of those factors. So I would have paid him. I would have stretched and extended and paid him. And if that means next year I lose Mooney or Banks or, Lenore, or if I got to pick one of those 3 guys next year because I'm signing Aiyuk, I'm okay with that. Because I think perimeter players in the passing game, whether we're talking about great receivers or a dominant corner, I think perimeter players in today's passing NFL have never been more valuable. And this is not the right time to part ways with a outstanding perimeter player inside your Super Bowl window when he's 26, when he's headed into having the best 3-year run of his career. This is not when you say goodbye. So I hope they get it done. I think they have I think Brandon's only chance to win the Super Bowl this year is with the 49ers. He's not winning a Super Bowl with the Commanders. He's not winning a Super Bowl with the Steelers. He's not winning a Super Bowl with the Jets or anybody else. If he's gonna win the Super Bowl, he's got to be a Niner. And if they're gonna win the Super Bowl, I think they got to have Aiyuk. I like the Niners, and I think they've got a lot of talent, but I don't think they get it done without him. So I'd get it done. And I think if you said make a prediction on when and this kind of thing, I would say Sunday. It gets announced during the game. And we have a official announcement on Sunday. Brandon Aiyuk is officially signed up long-term with the 49ers. That would be, if I had to guess, I would say Sunday during the game. That would be perfect. Get those guys back with a week to go. You get a week of practice. You bring on the Jets and, up and away. That's how I see it. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle. Thanks to Mancini's. Thanks to all of you guys. Thanks to Kev. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you